Welcome back, you filthy exiles, and yeah, we've got 3.27 coming, and a little bit of information came out today, so I thought I'd do a video talking about that, and also some of the speculations that are hovering around on Reddit, and also that just in general I think are going to take place in the 3.27 league. So let's get into it and talk about this. Okay, so first off the ranks, we have a bit of a timeline which was released, I think like a week and a bit ago, probably a little bit longer. Yeah, about a week ago. So basically we know that we'll get information drops for 3.27 on the 31st October at this stage. So there'll be a live stream on the 23rd. Actually, the expansion will be released on the 31st October, which we're only like 2 weeks away from. So that's not a lot of time at all, which means it's league start testing. And yeah, so we're going to be doing that from the weekend. But anyway, then the next question sort of comes up: what should we expect from the new Path of Exile League? And yeah, let's have a look at the first news drop that came out today, just around the future of mercenaries. Okay, so obviously in 3.26 we had the inclusion of the Mercs. Now they said the Mercenaries Challenge League will end soon, and you may be wondering what happens to it next. We really love the Mercenaries mechanic overall and intend on adding it into the game in the future, but it will not be added in 3.27, much like a lot of leagues when they go core. We need time to rebalance. And that's very true. There's a lot of things like Doriani's negative lightning resistance stacking and things like that that just like totally broken tire mechanics. They're going to then adjust the mechanics, review how they fit into the game, and when not necessarily appearing in every area, they will be returning, just not yet. So basically what they're saying here is from the 28th, we can expect that all items will go into the equip only tabs, or sorry, remove only tabs. Mercenaries will be deleted. Trathian gems will be a new reward from gem chests in Heist, so they're still going to be in the game. And Mercenary League specific uniques will move into the global drop pool. So that's at least a good thing. We're keeping some things out of this, and there definitely were some items that were released in the league that were quite powerful. In particular, the shield and stuff like that. I don't remember if it had interaction with Mercs. But this is going to be a bit limiting in a lot of ways, because the Mercs were quite a good way to level up really early and get to the end game. They were a really good source of power. And this sort of brings me to the next topic. We talk about game balance. And they definitely alluded to game balance in the previous interviews that they did about the forward Path of Exile leagues. So let's talk about some of the things that we might want to expect from game balance at this stage. At least some of the core things that you notice when you look at like poe.ninja and look at some of the metrics and stats around where the game sort of progressed, at least at like the week 10 mark and whatnot. Okay, so the first thing I think they're going to balance into the game would obviously be the new asynchronous trade system for that they've implemented in Path of Exile 2. Why do I believe this? Well, number one, it's really like a GUI sort of feature, and I can't see it being very difficult to implement on the basis that they've already done it with Path of Exile 2. So basically they would be, and we know that Path of Exile 2 is essentially the same code base as Path of Exile 1. So I couldn't see there being a massive issue between implementing that system in a Path of Exile 1, which arguably would be a huge game changer. Like, they've already done the work around how to get that to actually function, and it all functions pretty damn well, and everybody loves it. So that's pretty much the first thing off the cab that I think they're going to add in the Path of Exile 1. Like, that's going to be like one of their big cornerstone announcements. But I guess talking more into what we can expect beyond that point is really sort of some speculation here, just based on some of the observations. And like noting that really like where we're at with Path of Exile 2 now is like we've got a taste of like really like high powered builds and stuff like that from the Merc League. And I think the core focus will be about ultimate character balance. And there's a few areas that stick out, especially from like different builds that I tried throughout the league, as well as multiple builds over multiple years, and some of the stats that sort of stick out on at least one of the ascendancies that is pretty abysmal, that it looks like they may be looking to gear up to actually rebalance a fair bit more moving forwards. Okay, so the next thing that I think is going to happen is there's going to be a shift around the understanding of minions. So one thing that we saw, and I think like we can probably see like some of the changes that they implemented for Path of Exile 2 being like Path of Exile 2 specific balance changes, they're probably looking at the reaction of players around like, you know, things that don't currently work in Path of Exile 1 as well, and or are as accessible as what they are in PoE 2, and maybe these will be focus areas for Path of Exile 1 moving forward. So I think minions are a big problem in Path of Exile 1 right now. Like, obviously there are minions that do work, but the ones I'm sort of talking about in particular are like specters, zombies, reapers, and skeletons are all pretty bad. Like, they did make changes to golems in the last patch notes run from memory. So basically golems got a lot better and were a lot more playable than what they had previously been. They've been quite really, like, they're really strong in the previous league. But yeah, they just there are other minions builds that just don't work very well. So like, or they take a lot of investment to get up and running. Like, you know, you can get zombies up and running, but it's really inefficient to do that. Skeletons, same thing. Like skeletons, there were, I think, skelly archers that existed, things like that. But again, really, really niche and really difficult build to get up and running. And a lot of these skills have sort of fallen to the wayside and need a fair bit of rework and balance. I sort of feel like minions are, yeah, that they've gotten some hate over the recent years in Path of Exile 1. So like, at one point they were really strong, and then they get nerfed, and they added all the fossil items and the minion specific items, and that took away a lot of power when that happened as well, because like gem scaling and skill scaling wasn't anywhere near as good. So I think like this may be a real focus area for moving forwards. And beyond that, then, you know, we start talking about things like traps and mines. From memory, I think Hex Blast may have gotten nerfed, and they added a timer as well in the last league. But there are a lot of, like, avoiding, like, Hex Blast mines. I think things like, for example, the Saboteur Ascendancy is the second least played Ascendancy in the game, from what I've read on PoE Ninja. As at the end of the league, it sat around 1% of the remaining builds, and even throughout the league, it was a pretty unappealing ascendancy. Now, it did get some rebalancing over the years, but it just never really stuck out. Part of the problem with that is we look at like skills like fire, I think it's fire spire or lightning spire, things like that, just don't really keep up with other trap skills. And even like the spell skills within traps, things like that, like there are obviously builds that do work with it, and if you put enough investment into most builds, they will eventually start to sort of work. But it would be really cool to play like in a flamethrower spire trap, or a lightning spire trapper, or something like that. Part of the problem with these skills right now is they have these like obscene cooldowns, but really low payoff on the actual skill gems. Hence why no one really plays them outside of like a few really niche play configurations. So I think Saboteur is probably going to get a bit of attention in this league, just based on the players playing the active build. And also mines and traps are probably going to get a fair bit of rebalance, just as something that I would speculate. They're not as popular as other builds out there. Obviously, like, you know, ice trappers and stuff like that, and fire traps are still used in like RF builds and whatever, and even that's been nerfed over and over again. But it's a really powerful skill as baseline. There's just a lot of trap skills that are not the same. They're not as powerful, and yeah, it'd be really nice to see that sort of come into fruition again. The next one I think is the Assassin. I think the Assassin's going to get a fairly significant rework. Reason being is by the end of the league, about 0.5% were playing the Assassin. It just doesn't have the defense kit that like other builds have, and so it doesn't really excel the same way that other builds excel. And arguably, like, there's other ascendancies, like Warden went down to 2%. Gladiator was pretty low, even like filtering to like week 10 of the league. These ascendancies were still no better. So again, week 10, same stats. Even Gladiator, which arguably it got a pretty significant rework, just isn't enough to really separate it as like a go-to ascendancy. And obviously a lot of people were still playing Elementalist, Occultist, and Trickster and stuff like that during the league, with Chieftain, funnily enough, being the fourth most played ascendancy. But it would be good to see Saboteur get some attention, and the Assassin get a fair bit of attention, and a total rework, and even like mechanically rework how the Ascendancy functions would be really nice. And the last thing that I think may end up getting rebalanced a bit into the game will probably be on the basis of the popularity from unarmed builds in Path of Exile 2. So I reckon like things like face breakers, and they already sort of started doing this with last league. They changed face breakers total cap damage from 800% to 1000%. But I think they're probably going to look at like what they can do with unarmed builds potentially, because there was a lot of interest in the second game about this. So maybe face breakers might be coming back in a significant way. But it's really anyone's guess at this stage. These are just some things that come to mind when I look at like, you know, some of the trends with Path of Exile 2 and a lot of the builds that are being played there. And obviously there's a lot of carryover player base between the two games. So obviously they're going to balance things that people really enjoyed in Path of Exile 2 and potentially apply that to PoE 1, as well as a slew of other things. But I think just to sum up, minions and weaker minion gems, Saboteur, Mines and Traps need attention. Assassin needs a full rework, and maybe unarmed builds and different sort of methodologies of how builds can be approached may be a real focus area outside of things like Ephemeral's Edge, which they already started nerfing last league and whatnot. I think they want to move away from ES stacking builds and more to just scaling things up and making them a lot more playable without that huge level of investment, like, you know, trying to play a Reeve build, for example, and you have to stack a replica Alberon's set of boots is pretty wild. But anyway, those are some of the things that I'd speculate around character balance that we may see in the next league. The next big one is new skills. So we haven't actually seen new skills, like proper new skills, in some time outside of the occasional aura change or something like that. Obviously we got the trans gems in, and I actually like arguably preferred the I can't even remember what they're called now, it's been so long. But when there was like the different alternate versions of gems as opposed to the trans gems, because all the trans gems are is they take like the base gem and split the upper and lower effects of each part of the gem and create 3 gems out of one, right? I don't really think that that is that great. But that being said, you know, yeah, they're there, right? They're in the game. I would like to see some new skills, and there was like that Molten Lightning skill that you could get with the Merc characters in the last league that was really cool. There was some really cool Trathian skills that they could just add in as common gems now that I would really like to see in Path of Exile 1, just to like vary things up and give us some new things to play with. But trans gems are great when like they're out of ideas and not adding anything new to the game. But I would just like to see some like whole new skills come into the game. Like whether that breaks the meta or whatever it is, just like new skill gems would be fantastic at this stage, because now it's sort of like when you're picking a build, it's like the same old, and it's a little bit boring. So getting, you know, even like 10 new skills added to the game, which you would argue shouldn't be too hard, would be really nice at the end of the day. And yeah, be sort of going back and getting back on track with how PoE 1 leagues used to come out, where we get whole new aura and new skills and new this and new that. Now it's sort of been like a passing thought. It's like, oh, we added these weird trans gems in, and yeah, they don't really work very well, and we're just gonna use the base skill anyway, except for a few that work really well. But anyway, that would be another one that I would say. So obviously new skills, and hopefully some new auras and some new gameplay mechanics would be really nice as well. And the last one is Uber versions of the like the Zana bosses, the new bosses that were added in the last league, so on the 3.26 league for the threaded content. So those bosses in particular were just really easy. They didn't really, like, you could take any like average tier build and like go ham on them and farm them to your heart's content. Obviously you had to unlock them. So that would be really nice to see that getting scaled up a bit more, so that it actually poses some sort of a challenge to the average everyday build. But yeah, that's just another area that I think needs to be a bit more balanced. I think, again, like the last league, they probably rushed that one a bit more to get something out. And so obviously, and they said that too, that they were basically just like smashing as as much stuff that they could into it. And that's where Trathians probably came in as like, you know, one of those afterthought leagues and things like that, which is why they're not going to put them in the game in full sync now. Not for a little while probably. But yeah, it would be good to see that get balanced a little bit better and make that a little bit more lucrative. But yeah, other than that, like, is it a huge issue? Not really. It's just like adding in a bit more like difficulty barrier there to make it challenging, so it's not too you know, blast every boss with one hit sort of thing in Path of Exile 1. Anyway, these are just some of the ideas that come to mind around, you know, potential balance changes to the game and or inclusions that could be added in. I feel like we're getting back on track with like the everyday standard leagues. I don't know about other people, but it's felt a little bit weird for a little while. So obviously we got Path of Exile 2 now, and now we've got Path of Exile 1, and we're getting into this like cycle of like, you know, things are coming out on a regular basis and whatnot. And it's really good to see that. It'll be good to get back to that old feel of like, you know, you're just getting like straight up excited every 2 months, new league coming out, like it's completed content and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, these are just some of the ideas. Like, do I think they're all going to come through? Not necessarily. Obviously, there's things I would like to see come through. There's things that like statistically make sense. And otherwise, it's just like I've been playing Path of Exile for too many years, and it's just a gut feel sort of thing. It'd be like I'd really like to see that come in. But the big thing here, I think, is the asynchronous trade is the biggest ticket item out of the whole list. That being said, don't forget to like, sub to the channel, and please feel free to drop any comments of what you think might be coming to the new league down below in the comment section. And I will see you guys in the next video.